Yes, it's time for emerging issues. And number 5 for the year. In this one, we are going through the depreciation schedule. So, a pretty simple concept. I know we spoke about it last year, but just to bring everyone up to speed, what is it when we're talking depreciating assets? What sort of players are we looking at?
Yep. So you've obviously got the cash cows who are the ones who are going to make money, and a depreciating asset is someone who you think is worth a high amount, but has performed badly for maybe a couple of games, but you think they're going to get back to those heights, so you're buying them at a discount. So that can be from a range of things, like they could have had a HIA that they failed, there could have been an injury, or there's so many different things that they can have, which makes their price fall that 150 grand, which is the kind of magic number that we want them to make. And then all of a sudden you're buying a player for 600 when you think they're worth 750.
Yes, and it really helps us in recycling our cash because we know at the start of the season, particularly this one, we've got lots of good cash cows. At some point, they're going to peak, and we need to have some assets that we can bring in that will continue that growth in value. And as we know, B, first 5, 6 rounds, plenty of cash cows, a lot of base price guys doing really, really well. There's an injured player, so someone steps up, makes that money. But when we get to round 6 or 7, it can often be hard to spot a genuine cash cow. And that's where these guys that, for whatever reason, have dropped 100, 150, 200K are the type of guys that we're going to look to target because we keep our eyes on them and we only take them really if they fit our plans in any given round.
Well, exactly right. And there's certain players, like they don't have to be guns in this depreciating asset schedule. Like it can be someone who's you might think is a 400 grand player. All of a sudden they've had a couple of bad games or different types of roles or whatever. And all of a sudden, if you're getting them at 250 and they're going to get to 400, they're essentially your new cash cow, but they have proven themselves before rather than the unknown.
Yes, and we've actually got one of those guys in the list now. So we'll go through a few categories here. Now, the first one, we've obviously got Reece Walsh there. Obviously, we're massive fans of Reece Walsh at Talking League. -2 before the final updates. His score is what we classify as a bad 80-minute score. Now, in this one, Brenton, he played the entire game, so it's not like he was injured and went off after 5 minutes or was concussed after 30 or got sin binned or sent off early on. He just didn't have a great game, and as a result, a player like him is probably going to end up being anywhere from 75 to 125k undervalued in 2 to 3 weeks' time.
Yep. And as soon as he put that score up, I know that would turn a lot of coaches off. My headlights went up to basically say, oh, I could potentially buy him in 2 to 3 weeks. He was priced at 700 grand to start the year, and we could see a 5 in front of his price. And with the Broncos having a bit, I know we said we don't look at the draw too much, but they've got a few extra games at Suncorp coming up. He could very well fire and put you up to those 60s, 70s, and all of a sudden make all that money back.
Yes, and some coaches might go with, if we're talking about Reece Walsh specifically, well, he's had low scores in the past, and that's correct. He's a very cyclical player. He will have a couple of scores that are sub 20, but then he also complement that with scores of 50, 60, 70k plus. And as you said, mate, we can pick him up less than 600k. With this new minor buy around rule change where we don't need him to back up if he's the number one for the Queensland team, he's probably a guy that you could basically stash as your 18th man if you're picking him up under 600k.
Yeah, and look, we've also said, I think, I don't know how many times we've said on these podcasts that wing fullback is the hardest spot to fill this year with genuine players, which is why I took two what I thought was pretty decent guns. Reece Walsh could be that third mid ranger that you have, which you're happy to play, but if you're a bit worried about certain things that he's doing, he's a great 18th man to have.
Yes, and because he's got that high break even as well, you can actually get a bit of sample on him. If he has two really good scores, his price will just sit there in the low 600s and he's still undervalued. Whereas if he has another poor score next week, you'll be able to pick him up for mid 500s and he'll be a real bargain at that. Or you might decide that you don't want to pick him up because I know we'll talk about the Broncos and Raiders later. Do you think this is just a one-off where he just had a game where just everything didn't go right for him? Or do you think there might be something in it where we saw last year he had that really bad cheek injury against the Panthers that maybe his confidence running the footies just isn't there at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's like kind of like when James Tedesco had that kind of a bad start where he just looked like he was trying too hard. I really think that's what Reece Walsh was doing, and that's what was contributing to errors, as opposed to actually pulling off the play and getting the attacking stats. So I think he'll come good. I don't, I don't really see him as a top 5 wing fullback, but at the same token, if you're going to get him for 150 grand cheaper than his starting price, I think it's a bargain.
Big time. So keep an eye out for guys like Reece Walsh. They will pop up throughout the season. Next category got here, low minutes off the bench. So obviously David Fafita, first game for the Titans, he played 32 minutes. Brendan Picker has had 2 games off the bench, including last week where he got -9 in 30 seconds. And obviously, these two guys, different price points. Dave Fafita, elite fantasy gun. Brendan Picker, not so much. But both of these guys could come into the fore in the next 2 to 3 weeks, especially for someone like Piakura, who, if he gets that starting position back and rolls down to 260, 250k, could be a perfect cash down to help free up some funds to maybe actually go and pick up a David Fafita at 730k.
Yeah, it's a weird world where I say I'm probably more excited about the prospects of Piakura than I am Dave Fafita. Just because of exactly what you're saying is that Piakura has already had 2 of those scores where his price has dropped so low, and the person he would potentially replace is not the greatest football player, I don't feel anyway, being Jack Guzevski. So therefore, Pickering, he was touted as an Origin player, like in Origin camps and everything. And Madge has obviously said steal up your defense a little bit. Jack G didn't do that great. So a few more losses like that for the Broncos. All of a sudden, you're getting a starting edge who could average. All you need him to do is average in the 30s, and he's going to make you that 150 grand back.
Yep, and his career average in the edge when playing 50 minutes or more is 35. So I haven't even put it at 60 or 70. I'm making the assumption that there will be someone on there so he's not playing 80. That's that value you can have there. And just a guy that potentially you might be able to loop because, as we know, the Broncos generally always play Friday night Suncorp, even when they're away. Move into the next category, and this is the early exits. So Matt Burton, early exit this week, 20, not a great score. He'll have a high break even when he returns. And Victor Radley's another one, much like Casey McLean in week 1, where he clearly scored well below his potential, and as a result, he's going to have 2 or 3 weeks of high break-evens. And look, depending on where the Roosters team looks like and what your middle and edge positions look like, he might be a guy that fits a need for that short-term future, given he'll probably be 130k underpriced.
Yeah, I'm very interested in Victor Radley. Obviously, won't play Origin because he played for England. So, unless they've got some eligibility piece that he can play, but I don't think he will. Dual position, the Roosters have that great buy schedule for the major buy rounds. And I foresee him to be like a mid-40s player. I'm playing on the edge. So, he's one I'm pretty interested in, probably a little bit more than Matt Burton, because I think by the time Matt Burton comes back from his injury, we're going to be going into Origin, and then we don't know what his role will be, if he's 18th man or number 14 or anything like that. But again, from the principle of what we're saying for early exits is, yeah, they've had a bad score because they've had to go off for HIAs or injuries. So therefore, their rolling average is going to be right down from what they actually are.
Yes, and that's the key thing, because we're not saying these are the most spectacular players. We are saying these are guys, due to their rolling average, are going to be at a severe discount, and they might be an option when it comes to fitting in that extra gun that you're looking to accumulate. But more or less, that's this week's emerging issue. And I guess the main things that we want to have coaches be aware of is that identify the players that fit into these categories over the next few weeks, and also keep an open mind, because these guys are clearly options right now in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But we're probably going to have another guy who unfortunately gets concussed first tackle of a game and will also do the same thing that Victor Radley's about to do.
Yeah, exactly right. You can't pick those kind of injuries, but you can kind of, I guess, it's like the stock market where you buy in gloom and you sell in boom. And the gloom is where these injuries start from, and then you watch a couple of games, hope for like a mediocre score, which still gives you a decent amount of confidence. And as soon as they start firing, that's when you pull the trigger. We've done it so many times in the past with like your Ruben Garricks, your Kalen Pongers, James Tedesco's, like or Scott Drinkwater. All those guys do drop in price, and you end up getting them, and you stick and pick and ride the highs and lows.
Yes, and you just pray that those guys weren't originally in your round 1 team. But that'll do for this week's edition of Emerging Issues. For those watching on YouTube, if you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe.